Well, tonight, folks, I would introduce the station, but you're listening to us here live. Hopefully, you are, so you already know that we are 1650 PWAM. And this is a very, very special tribute to our friend. He was a brother, he was a uncle, he was a son, and to me, I will always consider him my mentor when it comes to podcasting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we're here to talk about the late, great Rick Hendrickson. Joining me live right now is our first guest to talk about a little bit about Rick, and that is, I don't know if you want your last name being said, so I'll just call you Casey Carnage.
I don't care.
Casey Osborne, Casey Carnage. Uh, Casey, how are you holding up, man, since you've found this out? You've been, by the way, folks, Casey has been very instrumental in helping me put this together. He's been kind of my liaison between Rick's family and this, so I want to thank him for that. But how you holding up, Casey?
Okay, there were a few tears on the first night, obviously, when I first heard about it. But, it's one of the things you just got to come to terms with.
Yeah, it still hasn't hit me yet, to be honest with you. I'm still in a state of shock. But why don't we do this? Why don't we share about how we first met Rick Hendrickson, and we can go from there about how big of an influence he has been to us. So I'll let you start first. How did you meet this wonderful man?
He was producing Monday Night Mayhem. I can't remember who all was hosting.
Oh, God,
but he was producing it, and they asked me. I was in there, and they wanted to do a year-end Christmas thing where they had little bits and pieces, but they wanted this thing to be long. They wanted me to do all these pieces and condense it to like 10 minutes. But the pieces they wanted, it was going to be like 50. It was like, okay. So I went in and I started editing everything. And I was listening to all this stuff and getting all these pieces together that I wanted to get. And I got it done and I sent it to Rick. Rick loved it. They thought, well, it's too short. But Rick was like, they don't know what they're talking about. 15 minutes is a lot of work.
Yeah.
So from then on, Rick and I talked a little bit because he wanted to know how I did it. I used the Roxio program and I just started editing all these pieces with this music in the background. And that got me started a little bit doing intros for shows and stuff as well. And Rick wanted to know how I did it. We started talking, and he liked my personality. I'm a talker. I'm kind of entertaining, I guess. But I'm also I got a polar personality. Either you really like me or you really don't, which is fine with me because I don't care either way. And he liked that. And so he was like, well, let's start out. He was doing the Bizzle show at the time. And he wanted me to come on a little bit because Steve couldn't make it some of the time. And he was doing his own show. And then after we did that, we kind of took a small break. And then he wanted to reformat the show. And I was already called Casey Carnage at that point. He was the one that gave me that name. And from that point on, we decided to do the Carnage Crew. And we ran for a couple of years. And we actually built up quite a big following compared to what the Bizzle show was running at.
What year was this? Because I started with Rick at about late 2004, early 2005. So what year was he doing the Bizzle show and everything?
Oh my goodness, it must have been 2007 maybe?
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't tell you exactly. At my age, all the years seem to run together.
I hear that. I'll tell a little bit. We can kind of bounce back and forth here, but I'll tell everybody how I met Rick. I was doing... Back in 2004, I was doing there was a website called barbwire-press.com, which was kind of like an affiliate site of what is now NoDQ.com, which is a wrestling, quote-unquote, news website. So I was doing radio for the barbwire-press.com, and I kind of had a falling out with them, and I ended up doing a show over with a kid. Literally, this guy was a kid. He was about 15. His name was Brett Buchanan, and he owned a website with a server. And by the way, I see you in the chat room. If anybody wants to get in the chat room, Casey's in the chat room. He could chat with y'all. We could reminisce a little bit in there. But anyway, back 2004, 2005, I started with Brett Buchanan after Barbed Wire Press, and Rick stumbled into the chat room of my my show one day, and he must have liked what he heard, because he's like, dude, you need to get away. You're too good for these people. The sound, the audio quality is crap with these people. You need to get away from them. I can help you do things 10 times bigger and 10 times better. And I was like, well, what can you do for me that these guys can't? Because I'm not just going to up and leave a network if I, without any proof. And Skype was a relatively new thing back then, folks. It shows you how far back we're going.
Yeah.
Skype was a relatively new program, so he showed me where to download this new magical program called Skype, where you could talk to each other for free. The audio quality back then for Skype was horrible. It didn't matter what kind of board you had, what kind of mic you had, what kind of internet connection you had. Skype was just crap at the time. But he showed me, here's how I can make you sound. He sent me, we recorded some stuff. He sent me the playback of it, and I liked it. And I was like, okay, fine. I need to get hooked up with this guy right away. He knows what he's doing. He knows what, he knows how to make me sound better than I've ever sounded before. He's obviously a pro wrestling fan. And more importantly, he knew pro wrestling better than I did. So we started doing a show. We adapted my name. It was called From Pillar to Post, like it is now. And we would do a show. First it was on Thursday. We would swap back and forth between Wednesdays and Thursdays, I believe, at the time. And started off to where you could get guests from TNA at the time, because back in the day when TNA was first starting, like in 0405, or they started in 02, but 0405, you could actually call up TNA. Rick found the number for TNA's offices in Nashville at the time. And he's like, call these people up and just ask for guests. Because, like you said, he was producing. I don't know when he stopped producing Monday Night Mayhem, but he produced that show for a long, long time.
Right.
He used to do In Your Head radio for a little bit too. But Monday
Yes.
Night Mayhem was his core show. He dabbled a little bit with Wrestling News Live back in the day and all that, those crew and everybody, which Wrestling News Live really didn't need a producer because they were hosted by a guy from a radio station.
Yeah.
But we started doing that show. We had several guests on. Talk about your show with Rick, because I'm curious to see how he, from show to show, if his style changed at all.
Before I go into that, I will let people know Rick was really a savant on being able to, like you mentioned, the Skype.
Yes.
He was really a savant on finding the cheapest way to do the best possible.
Yep.
It was crazy, because something that you just generally look up is like, oh, it's going to cost $200 or $300, and then he would contact you the next day. It's like, oh, it was $30. I went ahead and got it. It was real cheap. And I was like, well, how did you pull that off?
Yep.
It's like, like audio programs and stuff like that. Oh, I've got access to this, and it wouldn't be anything illegal. He would just find the cheapest way to do something that would make you sound like $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did learn that from him, from taking on to other things. But yeah, it was something that I don't think people realized about it. It was like he knew how to manipulate. Like, one time, I'll just do this and I'll go to your question. I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan, and I hadn't been in years. And he was like, well, do you want tickets to a game? And I was like, well, that's awesome. I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. He's like, well, I'm going to get them for you for a birthday present or something. And he got them, and the tickets generally ran like $30, you know what I'm saying, for a Major League Baseball game. And he got them for $5 a piece. I'm like, where did you get this?
That's Rick.
Yeah, and you're in Boston, and you're getting me tickets to Cincinnati for $5 a piece. I don't even know where he got them. And I was like, man, how? Because I wanted to keep doing it. He's like, oh, I got them on StubHub. I was like, well, how did they get to be $5 a piece 2 weeks before the game, whereas usually StubHub's like last 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's like
he got them.
You're sitting there wondering, whose hand did you have to grease to get this done?
Exactly. So I was just like, oh my goodness. It was just, he was very resourceful. He was very resourceful and things like that. So it was just like, oh my goodness, I just couldn't believe it. It was $5 a piece. You pay $5 a piece to go see a cover band in your local town.
Yeah.
You pay $5 a piece because you're going to spend that much in concessions at a little league ball game, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting to watch these pros who make millions of dollars for $5 a piece. And I was like, what? And he got 2 tickets. I'm like, how in the hell did you pull this off? And I saw the receipt. Because when you buy electronic tickets, it's a receipt as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, it's not like he was pulling my leg or nothing. It was just, I couldn't believe it with my own eyes. I'm like, how? Me and my cousin went and had a great time, but it was just like, how did you do this? And he just said it was basically something like a StubHub thing, but I've searched StubHub for stuff like that, and I never find it unless it's like an hour before the ball game.
It's almost like you almost used to question how he would get things. It's like, dude, is this on the up and up? Did you go to the black market to get this?
Exactly. Like you want to question it, and then part of you says, do I really? Because if you knew Rick, you didn't want to know sometimes.
Yeah.
You just did not want to know.
Yes. That is, oh, man. That is so true.
And Rebecca will tell you this later, that like she's like, well, I got to go into his computer to get some kind of password or something, make sure all his accounts in order, whatever, his bank accounts and stuff like that. She's like, but I kind of don't want to, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you mean because I know Rick.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're going to find on there. I mean, you can find a donkey show for all I know just because it was something funny.
Dude, I'm telling you, you mentioned the donkey show bit. I'll put it to you this way, and I'll face facts here. They're probably not going to play this at his funeral. Dude.
Oh, well, we'll see.
Dude was always like, I got to pay for the porn this month. I got to pay for the lobster this month. I mean, and you couldn't tell whether he was joking or not because Rick's their frame of mind. He was ordering that type of crap.
Yeah. It just whatever seemed to, it because he had this OCD, ADD thing, which made it really hard when you're trying to host a show sometimes because you're like, like Rodvig shared a story, and it's probably going to show up, Alec Johnson. It's probably going to show up later in the video, but like, it would be like Han Solo trying to keep the Millennium Falcon together until like 10 seconds before the show, and then all of a sudden everything's working.
Yep.
It's like, what that? But that's kind of how his life was. It was like an ADD, OCD kind of thing going on at the same time, and you had to know you didn't have to know what was going on. You just had to be ready for when it happened.
Mm-hmm. He was very much fly by the seat of his pants when it came to doing on-air stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he would play stuff on the air that I don't even want to mention. And there's going to be, he literally, I think it was like our third show together, he starts playing a naughty video in the background. And I'm like, Rick, really? But that's what made him so, to a lot of people, you're going to sit there and go, this guy was disgusting. But no, Rick was just funny. Rick would do anything to get a rise out of you. He would do anything to get a laugh out of you. He would do anything to flat out piss you off if he wanted to.
Yeah, just whatever moment he decided to get out of you. It's almost like a director, and a director in a play. It's like, how can I get this emotion out of you right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you would end up getting. Because I'll be honest with you, he did push my buttons plenty of times. But I think that's what he wanted because he needed the content to go that way. And I used to do a bit, and this is where I'll nice little segue here. In Carnage Crew, I got the name Casey Carnage because I would do these little 10-minute bits where I would just rant. I would go off the rails completely, off the reservation, and I would rant. And he would have me built up to that point that by the time I was talking, I was a super high pitch. I was damn near yelling in the microphone and just going off and just spouting whatever came to mind in that short period of time, whether it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Sometimes they went on because something made me mad. He made me mad. So he will push my buttons to where I got to that point. But go ahead.
I wanted to talk a little bit, like, I guess I think my question was his style. Did his style, because for me, he was very joking on the air. He could be serious when he wanted to be, and I always liked Rick when he was what I call serious Rick. In fact, he came on our network, our channel, a couple of weeks ago, and did some real serious radio, and it was probably some of the best radio I've ever heard him do when it came to just pro wrestling. Talk about his style with you guys and how he, his flow and everything when it came to radio.
When we did the show, at first he would be more vocally involved with the show. Well, we picked up a news correspondent who helped us with the news at the beginning of the show. Just kind of, this is what happened this week, and we would give our little 2 cents worth in it. And it was really cool for the format because then you spend 20 minutes talking about that stuff, and you don't have to go back and deal with it later.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't ignore it.
Right.
And then we picked up. We tried a couple other people, but then we got Alec Ludwig to join, and Rick just kind of went more to the background. It's not that he didn't have anything to say, but we would, and Sheldon knows this because there was one time we had somebody on who was pretty famous, and Sheldon was coming on after, and it was supposed to be a 20-minute interview, and it turned into being like an hour and 10 minutes. And Sheldon was supposed to come in after. He was like, I gotta go to bed. And I was like, dude, I understand, but I can't move this.
Right.
This is not pre-recorded. But Rick would kind of lay in the background on a lot of that stuff because I think we were actually very thorough with the four of us already involved. We were pretty thorough on what questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think to him, honestly, he liked the content. And we were pretty good about and we got to figure out how to find some of that stuff. Because he still has all of it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I don't know if he has any of the old Pillar to Post episodes that we did, because a lot of that stuff got, when my computers crash and hard drives burn up, and I don't think I have it hardly anymore. But there are a few episodes that I'm going to be posting on this channel here on this YouTube channel in the coming days, so be on the lookout for that, ladies and gentlemen. It's not exactly PG material because Rick, I don't think Rick could be PG when he wanted to. Like I said, there was serious Rick, and then there was, for me, normal Rick. And normal Rick was anything but PG. He said what was on his mind, and that was it. By the way...
You know how many times I would be talking to him, and I would be like, all right, Rick, because terrestrial radio was always checking us out. And I was like, and Sirius Radio was checking us out for a while because we would have all these guests on, and we would just always be bringing names, and we had a lot of listeners. And I was like, all right, Rick, we've got to play this a little clean tonight because, they're listening now.
The scouts
they're really
are watching,
listening, and and we got to play to their game. And it would be 5 minutes into the show, and an F-bomb would already be dropped or something like that. I mean, it's like, okay, let's just, this is our show, and you guys can kiss our ass. And that's basically how it was.
I'll put it to you this way. I got a text message here from Jeff Edwards, and it reads like this here. Jeff Edwards is a host of Blading for Truth, and he would Rick would call in when we would do our pregame and postgame shows, and he says Mania pre-show. Rick calls in and says nothing. 10 minutes later, you hear Joe say, "Rick, are you still there?" Rick's laughing. "Oh, I'm still here, White." He goes, this is the dude talking about me. This is the dude that said I can't do dick and fart jokes, and I've heard the F word 8 times in 2 minutes. So it's like whenever I wanted, it was almost like whenever I wanted Rick to be clean, I was the one that would go dirty, and vice versa. Whenever Rick wanted me, whenever I was supposed to be clean, Rick would go dirty. It was parallel sometimes.
Like you said, some people would say it was being nasty or whatever, but he really wanted you to just be you because he was just going to be him.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't like it, then to hell with him. Because
exactly.
that's, and I don't know if his mother's like that. I talked to her a little bit on Facebook the other night. I talked to his sister a little bit, and they'll give you more details because he was a pretty quiet person in public circles, social circles. So, like out in public. But there was a personality integrity, I guess is the phrase I'm looking for, where he wanted good radio. Let's just be real here.
Yeah.
He wanted good radio. He wanted you to be you. But he was not going to compromise you just to get to this other plateau.
Exactly. He knew when to go where.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's funny that you mentioned he wanted good radio. Rick was the only person I ever know of. Nowadays you hear podcasters and everything. We got about 10 minutes before Evan Ginsberg's going to come on, so I'll try to be brief here.
Okay. Yeah.
There's back in 04, 05, the word podcast didn't exist, folks. It was internet radio, is what we called it. And to Rick, this was always radio to him. He was a radio engineer in real life. He worked at terrestrial radio stations. And to him, what we did was always radio. He never called it a podcast with me. The podcasting,
Right.
like even today, podcasting to him was probably almost a dirty word. I think he almost hated it. So back in 0405, it was a very unknown process. You had to be in the know as far as to how to do this. I didn't know what a soundboard was or a mixer was until he showed me, like you said, the cheapest way to find things. He directed me to a website. He goes, you need this, 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 and this. And I was like, okay. I saved up, and this is how into this I was, and still am. I spent an entire paycheck. This is back when I'm in my early 20s, so I really didn't have any bills or family to take care of. So I spent an entire paycheck on all this stuff that Rick told me to get. And Rick was so kind enough and patient enough to sit down with me and say, this is where you need to connect this cable. This is where you need to connect that cable. This is how you need to run this. He could sit there, and it didn't take him long. That shows you how good he was at this. It could take him 30 minutes to tell a guy who had no idea what the hell he was doing and show him how to walk through things and show him how to, you'd be up and running and doing a sound check with the guy live on his stream and within 30 minutes of getting your equipment unboxed. That's how good he is.
Yeah.
And he even translated that into how, I believe for a little bit he was almost making a full living doing this. He's the first guy I know of that made a living doing podcasts or internet radio.
Oh yeah, he was very big about not giving away anything for free unless he actually liked you and wanted to help you.
Exactly.
And I don't mean that bad towards anyone. I mean, because I know he helped out Evan. I mean, Evan may have paid a little bit, but I'm just saying, but he also helped him out a lot more than what Evan ever paid, I can promise you, because I know I paid a little bit and got sponsors. It was a lot more than, I got a lot more back than what I paid in, if that makes any sense. Yeah. He was good about that, but he also made a living at it.
It got to a point where I was kicking him like $20 a month. And I'd be like, dude, do you want a little bit more? No, you're fine, White. He always called me White. He never called me Joe. It was always White or Whitey. We got a funny story here. We're doing Pillar to Post, and actually at the time it was New Surge Live Radio because he didn't like the name Pillar to Post. Wanted to change the name.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't think of another name. I've always been from Pillar to Post Radio. And he's like, well, how about you call it? And he's just goofing off. He goes, how about New Surge Live? And I was like, that's the one. So we were New Surge Live from that day forward. But he would sit there and go, you don't have to pay me anything for this. He ended up getting graphics made and everything for the new show. But he was making a living at doing this. And I to this day am sitting here wondering, how did you make a living at doing this? How did you?
Yeah.
And I guess it's because of the timing. He was ahead of his time, when it came to this stuff. Because nowadays, anybody, a monkey could do this nowadays. Back then, you needed some skill and you needed the know-how because it was almost a trade secret with him. He didn't let everybody know how to do this. If he knew he could get money out of you, he was going to get some money out of you.
I want to say this. I know we got to leave here in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I was typing something in the chat room real quick. Because apparently there are Carnage Crew archives somewhere, and Brassy Eyes knows where they are.
Yeah, Brass Eye. I want to thank Brass Eye for showing up because he would show up in the Pillar to Post days and record stuff for us. I think he was in charge of recording the archives for us on a weekly basis. So, Brass Eye, thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you for all the help that you gave us over the years. I really appreciate it.
Rick, it was, and you know this, behind the scenes, as far as in the public view, he was very unheralded, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's a saying that you can measure a man by what he leaves behind. And there was so much in this particular industry that he had his fingerprints on everything.
Mm-hmm.
He may not have had his name out in front, but his body of work. I mean, the hours of archives, and not to mention who he knew and what he did. It's like you put it before. I was like, I'm not sure about that, but I really thought about it. It's like he was actually kind of legendary in the genre because he didn't invent it, but he perfected it.
Yeah, I mean, he did a lot of stuff. I don't know if we should even get into some of the stuff he did. Like towards the end with the Wrestling News Live people, he really started to tick those guys off. And when you ticked Rick off, when Rick had an agenda or when Rick had something against you,
Oh God.
he went for blood.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. He would. I don't know about sabotage so much,
oh,
but if you think he was a wild card when you had to deal with him and he liked you,
Rick, I'll tell one more story here. Rick kind of hired me to do his dirty work one day, and I laughed my butt off to it at this day. There was a show on his network, on the Radio Wrestling Network. I forget the name of the show, but they were known for having like supermodels on as guests. They were kind of like, hey, look what Playboy Playmate we have on this week, and asking them, the questions. One of those type of shows had nothing really to do with wrestling.
was that Pat Crowley show?
No.
Okay.
King Firehawk actually, him and Firehawk had heat. A lot of
Ah.
heat there towards the later years. We'll talk. I mean, we could get into that later on, but Firehawk knows what happened and he's devastated. I even invited Pat to come on tonight. I doubt he'll show up, but
Yeah.
him and Pat had some heat, and it's probably the main reason why. Anyway, I ain't gonna get into that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
so anyway, he calls me up and goes, Joe, I want you to help produce this show because Rick showed me how to do what he would do, not to the extent technical wise, but I could produce a show like what I'm doing now, for others.
It's kind of like a Batman told Robin, I may have taught you everything you know, but I'm not going to teach you everything I know.
Yeah, it's like I'm always going to be one step ahead of you. So he goes, I want you to produce this show, and they haven't paid me in 3 months. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to signal you. Halfway through the show, I want you to cut him off. And if you didn't pay Rick his money, he would do stuff like that. So 30 minutes into this show, they're about to bring their guest on. They just come back from a commercial break, and Rick goes, kill him now. So I hit the button. Took him off the air. The boss said, take him off the air. Took him off the air. We then get into a three-way call with me, the host of this show, and Rick. And oh my God, these hosts of this show, you thought that Rick had killed somebody for real. Rick had committed murder because and Rick told him, look, I'm sick and tired of doing your show. You hadn't paid me for 3 months. He goes, if you want to jerk somebody around, go find somebody else to do it. Chris Cash at the time was charging people $200 an hour to do this. He goes, go find, go bother Chris Cash if you want to do this mess, but I'm not going to be jerked around by it. That's how serious he could be with this stuff. Rick wasn't always fun in games. When he wanted to be serious, he could be serious. But I always thought it was funny. Rick didn't want to do it. Rick is sitting there listening to this podcast, and he wants me to cut these guys off. So I was glad to do it for him. But Casey, thank you so much for coming on. We might have you back on a little bit later once we get some of our other guests off there. We gotta jump on and call Evan Ginsberg, okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right.
Evan's listening in, so hi, Evan.
Yeah,
I
thank
wish
you.
we could, we hadn't talked in a while, so I wish it was under better circumstances. But all the best to him.
Same for me and you, Casey, because I don't think me and you maybe talked twice, but
actually, I don't even remember. I used to drink a lot.
So did Rick sometimes, but anyway.
Yeah, that's different bird for a different feather for a different bird.
Yeah. All right, Casey. Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, no problem. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
I'll talk to you soon.
Casey Carnage, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call Evan and see if we can get Evan on the line. So bear with me here while I try to operate Skype. I'm not as good as Rick was with this. I will tell people that there is his sister, Rebecca, put out. People have been asking us what they can do for my brother. If you would like to donate for the cost of the funeral, which we encourage you to do, I'll go one step further. I'll give out the link for her PayPal account. but there are donation links at the bottom of this channel. All donations that come into this channel for the rest of the month of August and all for the month of September will get sent to Rick's family. So just keep them in mind. You can go to paypal.me/REBRICE84. That's REBRICE84 to donate to them. Otherwise, they suggest that you make a donation of your choice in memory of him to a charity of your choice. Flowers can also be sent to the funeral home if that's what you'd like to do. And we'll have more on that here in just a few minutes. Let's give Evan a call here. Let me see here. I know I have Evan's number here stored. See, this is where Rick was always one step ahead. He would have everybody's number. He would have everything. And I do apologize, everybody. This has literally been... I didn't find out about Rick until probably yesterday evening. A friend of mine who would jump on the podcast with me back in the day, my friend Robert Wells, he called me last night and he goes, "What did you hear about your boy Rick?" And I thought he was talking about Ric Flair because Ric Flair's been in the hospital. And I was like, "Oh God, don't tell me Ric Flair's dead." Turns out it was worse. He goes, "No, the guy you used to podcast with back in the day." So it turns out it was Rick Hendrickson, and I miss him. I keep waiting for him to call in. I'm going to be doing a show for SummerSlam this Sunday, and I guarantee you, if Rick was up and at him, if Rick was down for it, he would have called in and gave his predictions and gave, who he thought was going to win. He would have stuck around for the after show. He was starting to call into this channel more and more. So I want to thank everybody for bearing with me tonight as everything literally got thrown together last minute. Let me see here. Give me 1 second. Thank you, Evan. I do apologize. Thank you, Evan, for sending me that number. All right. See if we can get Evan Ginsberg on the line here.
Hello?
Mr. Ginsberg?
Yes.
Hi, Evan. This is Joe White. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, I'm very saddened by obviously what's happened, and I'm happy to be a part of the show and honor Rick.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first met Rick? Because you and him had a huge history together. He was always very fond of you.
Oh, I had been with a 50,000-watt New York City radio station, WBAI-FM, for 16 years, and when that ran its course, within weeks I was looking for an alternative, and somebody recommended Rick, and we just hit it off, and next thing I knew, we were doing very early internet radio, podcasting, and I'm talking a good 7 or 8 years where we did a show called Legends Radio, and we would have this very eclectic mix of actors, singers, wrestlers, and anything in between, much like the Joe Franklin TV show, which some people may or may not remember, but it was a very interesting mix of people and innumerable legends over the years who have also passed by this point, and there was Rick, and we do it same time, same night, once a week, like clockwork, and occasionally we'd have a tech issue. It was very early in the internet radio podcasting game, and but we shared some, great, nights, and we became personal friends. And Rick stayed at my house on occasion when he'd vacation in New York, and we'd go to a wrestling show, go to hear music. He also appeared on my TV show And the link is out there if you want to see Rick on TV. And speaking of which, if this makes his family or you guys or whomever, friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, feel better, I just want to point out that when you create art of any kind, whether it's radio, TV, film, it lives forever. It lives forever. And Rick, whether people realize it or not, engineered and appeared on thousands and thousands of hours of radio. Thousands. And did innumerable shows for different people, many times co-hosting, many times, coming on at, odd times during the show. And that's going to be out there forever. And even if you're not, doing a search for Rick Hendrickson, you may be searching a certain singer or actor or wrestler or MMA fighter or football player or whomever that, Rick was engineering and interviewing at the time. And there Rick is going to be 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And, anybody, I shouldn't say anybody, but most people can pop out a baby, but Rick created thousands of hours of art and pop culture, and that's going to survive forever. And I was associate producer on The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, and I acted with him in the movie. And 100 years from now, 200 years from now, people will watch that movie. I'll be long gone, and people will totally forget that I taught, thousands of hours as an educator in various schools. That'll be long forgotten, but the art will survive. And Rick's art, I'm not putting myself over, Rick's art will survive. And, it's hard to put a positive spin on a 33 or so year old, passing away so young. And I can't even imagine his mom's pain or his, family and close friends. But, if that makes anybody feel better, and I hope it does, I mean that sincerely, because, in the year 3000, somebody's going to punch in some celeb and listen to the podcast, and Rick's voice is going to echo through the cosmos. So I hope that makes people feel better.
He always, you said that he would come on, and speak on your radio show from time to time, but Rick more or less took a producer's role. Me and Casey, I don't know how much you listened to when I was talking to Casey, but Rick was always a joker. But I know that he always took your show very seriously. Can you talk about his work as a producer and kind of like his style as a producer and how serious he actually took that job?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, for a very inexpensive, operation, we'd be calling, world-class, movie stars and million-selling, singers and musicians and, legendary wrestlers who sold out arenas around the world and MMA fighters and, for next to nothing. And, and it worked. And it worked. Creating art on a shoestring is truly, what being independent media is all about, not beholden to some monster corporation. And, Rick was very proud of it and took it seriously. And, it was very, very, very exceedingly rare that he'd miss a show. Occasionally he would get sick like any other human being. And, but, 50 out of 52 weeks or whatever, there we were. And, it was done out of love, not out of money. There weren't any huge sponsors. There wasn't any, great commercial income. He loved it. He wasn't getting rich doing it. We loved it. We weren't getting rich doing it. It's the true spirit of creating art. And, for that, he could have made more money with somebody else than he was with us. And it wasn't the motivation. He loved radio. He he always said how much he loved doing radio, and it's an incredible medium. My radio mentor was a gentleman named Fred Giabold, who also passed relatively young, and Fred used to say to me at WBAI-FM in New York, he would say, radio is a blank canvas. Like right now, you're doing a tribute to Rick. You don't know what anybody's going to say. You don't even know who's going to call in. You don't know who's going to be on. It's a blank canvas, and it's an incredible art form. Fred used to say, you're creating something from nothing, and Rick created the means to do this, the equipment, the passion, the time he invested. And I'm going to say something sincerely. I'm not just saying this because, he died. Some of the best nights of my life were doing that show. We'd get on the air with guys like Roddy Piper and superstar Billy Graham and Cuba Gooding Sr. From the Main Ingredient, Robert Vaughn. I mean, legendary people, and a lot of them are gone now. And it was your one chance to talk to your heroes, your childhood heroes, your idols, and God, the musicians we spoke to, and the other side of the coin. Even though we called it Legends Radio, we always supported indie musicians, indie artists, indie filmmakers. So guys who got no attention suddenly were being heard by thousands of people. And, some people would say to us, this was the first time I was on the radio. And it really meant something to them. It showed their art wasn't just being created in a vacuum. Somebody was taking it seriously. Somebody was respecting them as an artist, as a creator. And, multiply that times thousands of people. Thousands of people. Rick did thousands of hours of radio, without exaggeration. We were on, as I said before, 50 times a week, 50 times a year for 7 or 8 years. That's just one show. Mm-hmm. How many shows did Rick do? There's thousands of hours of Rick's art, out there, floating around, and whether you want to hear Rick or me or you or a legend or an indie artist, I would have artists say to me years after the fact, I was so excited to do that show. Nobody else took me seriously. And this is all thanks to Rick. I don't know one button from another. I didn't know how to put on the Skype. If you hadn't called me on this phone, this wouldn't be happening. Okay.
I will say
this was all Rick's doing. Okay?
He had me produce for your show a couple times, and even I was doing Steve Ludwig's show because he taught me.
Yeah, I remember.
And he was like, Evan's old school. He doesn't know crap about technology. Call him, press the button, let him go. That was pretty much it.
Exactly.
I want to ask you. You got an advantage over me. And I envy you because of this. You got to meet the man in person. I've known Rick since 2004, and I never got to meet him in person. We had talked about getting together numerous times.
Rick stayed at my house. I more than knew him. Rick was a friend. Yeah.
So, talk about a couple. Do you have any stories that you could share with us? Any fun stories about the time you got? I know that you guys. I believe he said he went to Ring of Honor with you a couple of times. I think to WrestleMania in New York. He was trying to get together with you.
We went to Ring of Honor, and we saw Carl Anderson against Mike Elgin, which was tremendous. And I'm a jaded old school wrestling fan, and unless it's great, I don't blink because I've seen the best of the best. I've been going to wrestling live since 1974, so. Just by sheer luck, we saw something great, Anderson and Elgin, and it was a really top-notch show. And Rick did my TV show as well, which was a lot of fun because he's a radio guy. So there he is sitting on the couch as a guest, which was something new and different for him to be the interview subject. And Rick had a very, very dry sense of humor. He was a very intelligent guy. Rick was interesting. Rick was careful with his money, but he also liked to go out and spend his money.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
he did.
which I respected. You know, you got guys online who are selling $800 SummerSlam tickets, but you know, a wrestler dies, or you know, or even in this case, Rick dying. You know, God forbid they throw a buck into the till. You know, people are selectively poor. Rick made his money, was careful with his money, but enjoyed his money. He was always at the football game, always at the hockey game, always at the wrestling match. You know,
I can remember the trip he took with you to Ring of Honor, and I think he even went to WrestleMania back when it was in New York. You know what the highlight of his time there that he could not stop bragging about was the 99-cent pizza store that he went to.
Oh yeah.
He's like, Joe, you got to come up here. They got this store. It's 99 cents for a slice of pizza. I must have ate a whole pie by myself. So,
yeah, we still have that. Well, you know, they make the money on volume, but still. But Rick enjoyed himself. If you go on his Facebook page, you see pictures of him at football games and all kinds of sporting events. He didn't just squirrel away the money, but like you said earlier, you know, he'd find quality equipment cheap. He was good with bargains, and there's nothing wrong with being careful with your money. A fool and his money is soon parted. When I read, you know, people are spending $2,000 for SummerSlam, I'm not impressed when I see them waving from the seat. I'm like, dude, you're going to need that money one day. You know, that was not a brilliant move right there. So,
well, Evan, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. We got Sheldon Goldberg coming on here in just a little bit, so I want to go ahead and make time for him as well. But any last words here before we let you go?
Yes, I want Rick's family and close friends to know that I am forever indebted to him. Forever indebted. I got to talk with and create radio with, you know, some of the greatest names in history. You know, guys who perform with the Doors, and you know, like I said before, many of my childhood wrestling heroes and many of my musical heroes. You know, R&B stars that I grew up with, jazz stars that I grew up with, and without Rick, this never would have happened. And again, many of them have passed, and this will survive long after Rick, long after me, long after you, and that means an awful lot to me. Rick created this. I couldn't have done it without him. Like I said, I don't know one button from another, and I've been heartsick this week, really. I just, you know, it's just, what can you say? What can you say? The guy was young. He was extremely talented. But again, I'm just going to leave you with this. Rick created mountains of art and content that'll live forever. And not many people can say that. And I hope in some way this will get acknowledged, you know, beyond this tribute show. Because, you know, I look at Rick as a pioneer in wrestling and MMA, podcasting, radio shows. You know, everybody and his mother has one today. That wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago when he started doing this. It was not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, he never really, I don't think he ever liked the term podcast. This was radio to him. He was doing
Absolutely,
radio,
me too. I always looked at it as, you know, I'm on the show with a world-class actor, singer, athlete. You know, this isn't a podcast. This is a radio show. I'm taking this seriously, and so did Rick. And, you know, if you want one message for me to leave you with, I'm forever indebted. And, you know, man, bless him, man. It's like, it's a shock. It's a terrible thing. But, God, in 33 years, that man created a lot of art. And it's gonna survive. So, you know, and thank you guys for doing this, because, you know, the wrestling media, they're busy with SummerSlam. You know, they don't understand the priorities. You know, so for you to do this is a beautiful thing, really.
All right, Evan, thank you so much for coming on, man, and we hope to talk to you soon, and just keep
Yeah,
doing what
stay
you're
in
doing,
touch.
sir.
Stay in touch.
Will do, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
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 That was Evan Ginsberg, ladies and gentlemen, of Evan Ginsberg's Legends, and he even does a TV show up in New York. And he like I said, I'm envious of him. He met the man in person. I knew Rick for 12, 13 years and never got a chance to meet him. I'm going to tell a quick story here before we call Sheldon. It's an embarrassing story on my part, and it just shows you how young and how green I was at this. We get Bobby the Brain Heenan on as a guest. Very excited. It was like, we had just did AJ Styles the week before. So, imagine AJ Styles in 2005 when, he's really starting to take off doing Ring of Honor and TNA and such. But we got Bobby the Brain Heenan on. And this was a huge get for me. I've been doing this show for less than a year. I'd interviewed people like Jimmy Hart and, we had, countless others. But this was the mecca for me, Bobby the Brain Heenan. So we get Mr. Heenan on, and we're going through the interview, and we're about 3 or 4 minutes in. And again, y'all feel free to laugh at me because, like I said, this was just showing how green and stupid I was when I was younger. I had forgotten that he had managed Big John Studd at one point. So Rick asks Bobby, what was it like managing Big John Studd at WrestleMania? And my stupid tail cuts in with, I don't think he ever did that, Rick. And me and Rick start going back and forth about this. And again, I'm stupid. I was totally green as goose, you know what. And Bobby Heenan goes, guys, excuse my language here, but Bobby goes, guys, call me when you get your you-know-what together. And he hangs up the phone. And it's one of the few times I got lambasted by Rick. He was so ticked, and I was freaking out. I was like, oh, my God, it's Bobby the Brain Heenan, and he just hung up on us. But we recovered from that. We turned it into comedy. We turned it into, hey, we're the show Bobby the Brain Heenan hung up on, and that was Rick's idea. So somebody ended up, before memes became a thing on the internet, somebody created a meme. It was a photo of me hugging Rick in a classroom, a school classroom, and on the chalkboard in this classroom, it had Pillar to Post Live at the top of the chalkboard, and it says ratings numbers. One peak in the chart has AJ Styles. The next peak up was like Eric Young. It dipped down for Gail Kim because, let's face it, Gail Kim was probably the most boring interview we had ever done. And then right at the top of that, the highest rating ever up above it, it says, Heenan hang up. Me and Rick saw this. I don't know who created this meme, but we died laughing. And we turned it into a bit on our show. We made chicken salad out of you-know-what. But I'll tell you this. I never gave Rick a cause to yell at me from that day on. And it taught me a valuable lesson. And it taught me a valuable lesson of do your research. Do your research. Let's go ahead and call Sheldon Goldberg here, see if we can get him on the line. Casey in the chat room. Bill Dundee told us after his interview to go F ourselves, and we popped so hard for that because he meant it as a joke. So many good times with this man, sitting, in the co-host chair with him. It was so awesome. Let's give Sheldon a call here.
Hello?
Mr. Goldberg.
Yes.
Hi, this is Joe White from Pillar to Post Radio. You are live on
Hey,
the air.
Joe.
How are you, sir?
Well, I'm best as I can do.
I hear you. We're here, of course, as you know, thank you so much for coming on. We're, of course,
I wouldn't have missed it.
We were, of course, paying tribute to Rick Hendrickson. Mm-hmm. You had an interesting story because he helped you out on the promotion side of the deal with your promotion.
Right.
Talk a little bit about how you met Rick and what he meant to you.
I met Rick online through, he was doing
a show with Evan Ginsberg. He was producing that show. Casey Osborne had kind of reached out to me and connected me with Rick. And Rick was a local guy. I had maybe met him once or twice, actually in person. And Rick was just one of those guys who was a great resource. He was always fun to talk to on the phone because we had a few interests in common. He had worked in Boston radio, and I had dabbled in Boston radio many years before when I was in high school, around that period of time. And then I had a show on a local station back around about 2005. I'm sorry, 2006 through. No, I got the timeline wrong. 2008 till 2011, and we had we had talked about a lot of different things, and I was telling him one night about how I was having a terrible time with the web hosting for our company's website. He said, "Well, hey, I can set you up with the hosting. I can do that for you." And it was a crisis because the company that was hosting our website was threatening to pull us down, and it had to do with files that we were storing on the site that didn't have anything to do with the site itself. We would use the website sometimes to trade files when we were doing television, so we could upload and download and communicate files to each other rather than use Dropbox or something like that. We just used our website for that, and they were about ready to throw us down, and Rick bailed us out and so forth. And he was always there when we had some sort of an issue with the website. He had actually given up the hosting business, and we changed hosts just this past summer. But he had always a good friend, always a guy who was willing to help, always a guy who was a good sounding board. I was very impressed with some of the things that he had done in terms of being a producer, and also some of the deals that he had. The Tap Out deal was kind of pretty interesting. That was a pretty big deal for him. He was just one of those unsung heroes of wrestling. And there's a lot of them out there, but Rick was special. And he was special because he meant a lot of things to a lot of people. And sometimes in wrestling, you wouldn't see him at a show, but he played a very important part in our company by, keeping us online and giving us the ability to do things. So he's going to be sorely missed by a lot of people. And I think that, it's a great tribute to him that his friends have come together to do this tonight. And it's a very appropriate tribute to do this online for Rick. He was just a special person. I'm just so sad that he's gone. I can't believe it. I was in complete and total shock. But boy, you talk about people who meant things to a lot of people and you wouldn't realize it, but he was one of those guys. He was one of those guys that really, you ask a lot of folks, ask people like Evan Ginsberg, ask around in the wrestling business. These are people that make our world go round in a lot of ways, sometimes in ways that are less obvious. But he was one of those folks, and let me tell you, I'm so sad for his family. I'm sad for all of us because we don't get to pal around with him anymore.
Yeah.
But he'll be in our hearts. He will continue to be in our hearts thanks to you. And man, what a loss.
It reminds me, I don't know if you're familiar with Doc Young, who used to do Wrestling Weekly with
Sure,
Les
absolutely,
Thatcher.
yeah. I knew Doc Young.
And we lost Doc earlier this year, and Doc was another pioneer in the podcasting business, and now we've lost another. We used to have you on our show a lot of times. I mean, a lot of times.
It.
And I loved having you on.
I never missed the chance to be on. I really, I've always been of the mind that, I want to support people who do podcasts. I want to support people that are reaching out and trying to do something. It's a point of entry for a lot of people. And I always had a good time on the show. Casey's remained a friend. Of course, our dear departed Noreen, she was a sweetheart. I spoke with her quite a bit off the air and so forth. And it gets to be like a little bit of a family. And these this is the family that supports what you're doing. Other people might laugh at, oh, you're in wrestling, gee, nah. But guys like Rick and yourself, validate the things that we do, and that's why we love each other the way we do.
Do you have any fun stories that you want to share about Rick? Anytime that he made you laugh or helped you out, really? I mean, you said he's helped you out numerous times, but was there any stories that stand out to you?
We last year we were having a terrible problem with our website. Somehow somebody hacked it and it infected it with viruses, and we couldn't. We ended up having to ditch the server, and we had to just buy hosting someplace else. But just I'd have these panic calls because we'd have shows, and one of the ways that people would buy tickets to our shows is online. If they can't get on our website, they can't buy a ticket to our show.
Right.
So I was in absolute panic, and Rick was totally there. He was totally concerned. He was totally working hard to try to find a solution. We ended up getting it fixed. We had to actually move to a different host to do it. But when if you needed him and you called, he came, and that's the mark of a true friend.
Rick always told me that you once promoted a couple shows with himself. Did he ever talk to you about his promoting days at all?
Not really. I didn't realize that he had been a promoter. Lots of people have. I never really. He didn't really discuss it too much with me. Maybe he thought I would kind of look down on it or something, which I wouldn't have done. But do you have any light to shed on that?
I just know that he used to say he promoted like a couple shows up in his area before. That's if anybody knows his screen name, it was always MXPWX. That was how you got a hold of him back in the day. Back during the days of AOL Instant Messenger. That's how that was his screen name. So I mean, I would ask him about that, and he's like, that was the name of my old wrestling promotion. He really never went too much further in detail, but again,
it takes a hearty soul to promote wrestling.
Yes,
let me
it does.
tell you.
Yes, it does. And anybody who gives it a try has my respect. Well, Sheldon, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we let you go? I know your time is precious to you, and thank you again for coming on.
Well, you know what? I always have time for Rick and Rick's friends, and particularly Rick's memory. I want to thank you for giving me the chance to weigh in here on this. And let me tell you, I think there's a great lesson in life, and that is that you never know what the little things that you do mean to people. And Rick was one of those guys who meant a lot to me. He meant a lot to my company. Like I say, you never saw him at a show. You never saw him hanging around or whatever. But he was as important as anybody in that locker room. And just a sweetheart of a kid, and we're going to miss him terribly. And if his family is listening, God bless you for bringing this wonderful kid into the world. And, you guys are great friends. So let's keep Rick in our hearts and in our minds. And thank you for giving me the chance to say a few words about my friend.
Not a problem, Sheldon. Anytime you want to do so, anytime you ever want to promote anything, you got a place to do so right here.
Well, anytime you want to hear somebody yak, just give me a shout. I'm always happy to come on and weigh in about all manner of topics. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheldon, and you try to have a good night, sir.
God bless, Joe. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And God bless you, Rick.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye. Going to take a little bit of a break right here and play a video here. This video was sent to us. Again, thank you, Casey Osborne, for help putting this all together. He was like, did you contact this person? Did you contact that person? Half the people that Rick did shows with, other than myself, I really didn't know, sadly. And because there was a good period of time where I had to stop podcasting. But I always kept in touch with Rick. We would do a show here and there. But from 2005 or 2004, 2005 up until about 2011, it was every week. But after me and him stopped from pillar to post, he went on to help countless others. Um, this next one is this video I'm going to share with you guys is from a guy named Alec Johnston, and he's going to talk a little bit about Rick and how he influenced his life.
Hello. I'm sorry. This is a video, and if you're listening on the radio, then obviously you can't see this. However, I want to take a few moments to talk about our friend, but he was everyone's friend, Rick, and he was everyone's friend because he just had this natural ability to make you laugh, make you feel wanted, make you feel welcome, make you feel part of something. And there was so many times we'd be preparing to do a radio show, and up to the very last minute, you'd either be on Skype with him or on the phone or however we were connected with him, and he'd be getting everything like plugged in and trying to get stuff lined up and trying to synchronize a video link or an audio link or a pre-recorded thing, and then suddenly the light would go on. We used to say that the light's on, time to go, and everything would just fall into place like this magical thing. He was like a wizard when it came to technology. He could make stuff work when you couldn't. There was several times I was having computer issues or audio snafus and technical things that I couldn't figure out with my computer, and then he would just go through it piece by piece with me in the simplest way possible, throwing horrible puns and mocking me the entire time because it was simple for him and it was funny to him that I could not figure this out. And just his laughter and how he viewed things and how life was to be cherished and enjoyed, not to be endured but to be enjoyed. Just an amazingly open individual when it came to the world, and he had this just wonderful way of making you gut laugh, where you throw your head back, you're laughing, or you're doubled over holding your stomach laughing. You could have tears rolling down your face, and sometimes he never struck me as someone who would line up gags or punchlines, or it's just how he was. He was just spur of the moment, off the cuff, top of his head, and it just made everything funny and funnier. He could say something, or sometimes you'd be doing an interview and something was said, and you could tell he had his hand over like the mouthpiece or over the microphone, but you could still hear him either giggling or chuckling over this attempted muffling, and I'll never forget him. He's even thinking of him makes me smile. He was like this. He was a gigantic kid. Basically, he was a big kid, and everything was funny. And when I think of Rick, I think laughter, humor, smiling, inappropriate behavior for the sake of laughter. That was just how he was. Even if it was a joke or a gag or a pun, he was never malicious. It was always to make someone laugh or just break down in hysterics. And then his legacy is that more people need to laugh, and to see the funny side of everything. And I'm gonna miss Rick, but I'm even more thankful that I got to meet Rick. He was a part of my life, and yeah, an amazing human being. And I'd rather be filled with joy from knowing him than filled with sadness that he's gone. Sleep well, big man. I'll see you wherever I see you. Peace be with you.
Very, very well said. Ah, man, this is rough. He brung up his humor, and he would always be crude for the sake of laughter. And one thing about Rick, he would go into, I guess the comedians call it working blue. He would go into blue territory for the sake of laughter, and he would do such juvenile things. But um, but heaven forbid you should go blue. Heaven forbid I should be the one when we were podcasting to dip into foul territory, so to speak. Because it was like he could do it, but nobody else was allowed to. Jesus White was golly White, watch your tongue. Don't be funny, White. Don't try and be funny now. Let me do it. You set him up, I'll knock him down. Classic example. Did the Wrestling Radio Awards for some website. And we were never nominated for an award. There were others that Rick produced. Rick produced Show of the Year nominees, folks. I mean, granted, it's a big popularity contest, but Rick put in the work, and Rick made shows popular. And we would do this gag every year. They would always produce it around the Royal Rumble, which for those of you who are not wrestling fans, it's an event that WWE does in January. Look it up. It's one of their bigger pay-per-views of the year. It's awesome. But we would always be the ones for the Wrestling Radio Awards to give the official Royal Rumble predictions. And I need to preface this by mentioning one name. That's Wade Needham. Wade Needham was a podcaster who had been doing it just as long as we had, if not longer, out of California. He was condemned. You would never get by with this in 2017. So keep in mind, this is like 2009, 2010. You would never get by with this stuff today. We would be branded, and ran out of town on a rail. But Wade Needham's in a wheelchair. And we always used to, can't believe I'm sharing this, man, but Rick would want this shared. Because Rick would bring it up all the time when we spoke. Rick would always ask me, speak to Needham lately? You speak to Needs a Ham lately? And Wade Needham was in a wheelchair because of back surgery that had gone wrong. And we did this bit when we gave our Royal Rumble predictions. They even put in background music and background noise like we were at the Golden Corral buffet. Picture that in your head. It's me and Rick, and we're speaking like we're sitting in the middle of a buffet. Or as Rick used to call it, the big boy. We're sitting up there at the big boy, which he informed me is a northern term for a buffet. And we would give our Rumble predictions. In every other match or so, we would call out Wade Needham. Wade Needham, that's your 5th plate, you bastard. Needham, you're going to need a bigger wheelchair if you keep eating. And we go and do another commercial. And the big bit one year, and this is the only time I can remember where I truly popped Rick Hendrickson, because Rick Hendrickson could make anybody laugh, but he was very, very hard. It was very hard to make the man laugh. At least for me, it was. The one time I can truly say that I made the man laugh was when I was like, we're giving our Rumble predictions. This is like the second year we did this, and he's like, well, so, White, who do you think's going to win the Rumble? And I'm just like, hold on one second. I got something I got to take care of. And the guy who edited this together put loud plates crashing in the background. It's some of the funniest stuff you ever want to hear. It's like me and Rick are in this buffet. And I went far away from the microphone to the other side of the room, but I turned the mic up, the gain up on the mic to where I can be heard. And I got my headphones on, and Rick is like, oh, God, White, what are you doing? Don't try to be funny now. Don't be funny, White. And I hollered out. I was like, see if I can do it here. I was like, get away from there. That's mine. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, Needham has the cheese whiz, and he won't give it back. And Rick just started busting out laughing. I take great pride in this. It's a cruel thing to make fun of a man in a wheelchair, especially nowadays. But I took great pride in this because I popped Rick Hendrickson. I made Rick Hendrickson laugh so hard out of this. He's like, why does he have cheese whiz? I was like, I don't know, but he won't give it back. I was like, give me the goddamn cheese whiz. I'm going to tip over your wheelchair if you don't give me back the cheese whiz. And while I'm doing it, I'm going more and more into it, because the more I would go into it and the more I would crank it for every dime it was worth, Rick Hendrickson was laughing hard. To the point that we ended up stopping the recording. He had to go, stop laughing. And then we had to finish the segment. And I take, that's friendship to me. That's the kind of guy Rick was. But that was the only time I got away with, quote unquote, being funny. We're going to have his sister, Rebecca, here on with us at about 8:45 tonight. She's going to finish this up. I want to throw up the phone number here on the screen if I can. If you'd like to call in and share a brief story, I'll try to put you on. I'm nowhere near as good as Rick was. Rick would have been enthused with this OBS program that I use, because this program came out well after he stopped. Another thing about Rick, and this is personal for me, I moved in with my current girlfriend in 2013, and I had been a truck driver for a little while, which that always popped Rick. Stay away from those lot lizards, White. I'd get a random text. What woman do you have in the truck with you tonight, White? But I came off the road, and I was jobless, and I needed a job. And Rick was like, I got the perfect thing for you, White. I got the perfect thing for you. And he had just started working with a company called Support.com, working in their Comcast tenant, which he took customer service calls for Comcast. Your internet, if you have Comcast internet, your internet broke down. Once you got past the people in the Philippines, we were who you talked to. And he's like, you need to go apply. I'll put in a good word for you. And sure enough, I got the job. And my career, so to speak, has not been the same since, because I can't go back to working in a normal brick and mortar store anymore. I've been working from home for the last 5 years, and I have a great quality of life, all because Rick Hendrickson put in a good word for me and gave me a shot. Caller, what's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Matt Goodwin. I've known Rick about 17 years. He's one of my best friends. I met him in high school, and I can tell you the guy always made you laugh.
That's true.
There was nothing that the belly laugh that got the video caller was talking about. It was a true story. I know his family personally, and I know how much he cared about radio and how much he just loved people. He loved wrestling. He loved MMA. He loved doing radio. We took a trip one time to New York, and we met Evan. Went out to eat with them. I got to meet Evan, and he's a great guy. humble guy, knows a lot. And we would watch pay-per-views together, and we would go to Bruins games together. And I mean, the guy just cared. The most craziest thing is that he cared so much about people, and he always wanted to help somebody out. To the point where we even were roommates a couple years back, and he was always in there in his room tweaking away at the radio board. I got a show I got to do. Can't be late. I got to call White or I got to call Evan, and this stupid bastard is trying to call me, and I got to get online. I got to get my stuff ready to go. And he never made excuses. He always wanted to be on time. And he always cared about being professional at it. I think that was the most amazing thing, is that he always wanted to be professional at it. He, and it's just some of the stuff, like there's a story about the WrestleMania and how he wanted to have the 99-cent, pizza, I think it was.
Yes.
There's a story where me and my dad, we went to a Bruins game with him, and my dad said, Rick, you bought these tickets for us. We're grateful. We're going to eat wherever you want. And so my dad's looking forward to like going to get a steak or like sitting down. My dad's going to pay for it, right?
Right.
And Rick turns and looks at my dad. I swear to God, I'll never forget it. He goes, I just want to go to the 7-Eleven and get the 99-cent hot dogs. And my dad goes, are you fucking kidding me? Excuse my language. And he goes, I offered you anything in Boston, and you want to go get 99-cent hot dogs? And I think the total that we ate for that night was $10.
Oh my Lord, that's fantastic.
And I kid you not, like, it's been a tough week for me because I was there at the end, and he was a great guy. He was a great friend. We known each other since I was 18 years old. I'm now 34. And we had good times and we had bad times, and we had friends come and go. And he would go through bad times, but you never knew it.
Right.
And he always tried to get you to be happy, no matter what he was doing. And he was crude. He would say the things that like you wouldn't say. You'd be around people. No, I get this. And to speak something about his promotional thing, because I know a lot of people didn't necessarily know what that was about. I mean, there were days he probably kill me for saying this, but we went to a venue in Pepperell, and he used to promote this guy named Sparta. And it was an indie show. Sparta would get guys like Raven, and Sparta would get guys like, guys that were like a little bit past their prime, but he could get them in for fairly inexpensive money.
Right.
And we go there and we set up the ring, we set up the chairs, and he's like, oh, I'm going to pay you, we're going to feed you. Rick's all about it. He's like, we're going to meet some people, we're going to meet new people, because he was always promoting.
Mm-hmm.
He was promoting himself, or he was always promoting whatever brand he was doing. And I think it was Mike Awesome at the time. He broke the light because the chandelier was right below the ring. And so he broke the light, and that was the light for the whole venue. We're in a VFW.
Oh,
and
wow.
we said, are you sure you want to set up the ring right underneath the light? Somebody's going to break it. And Sparta's like, yep, that's where I want it. I want the chairs around it. Now, it made sense that the light wasn't there, but the light was there.
Mm-hmm.
So Rick goes, whatever you want, grabbed a bunch of guys. We did it. Breaks the light last match of the card. Sparta's pissed. We go out back and we're like, okay, so we're gonna clean up the show. He goes, no, you bastards, you put the ring there. Rick goes, you told me to put the ring there.
Typical
we're like,
promoter.
yeah, you told us to put the ring right underneath the chandelier. We knew it was gonna break. And he goes, I'm not paying you. Rick turns and looks at me and goes, you drove. I'm getting the F out of here. Let's go. And he goes, what about my ring? He goes, do it yourself, and he walks out.
That's
And so
Rick.
if you pissed him off, you were done. But if he was your best friend, he'd be there for you through thick and thin. And Rick was just one hell of a guy. It's hard because he was like a brother to me. But the issue with it is he was like the crude brother that he never wanted to bring, home. But he was best friends with my dad too. Like he knew my dad like the backside of his hand, and so he always cared about family, and he always cared about his family, and he always go to bat for you no matter what. Whether you're learning the wrestling business and you just wanted to watch the pay-per-views, whether you were learning radio, he went to school for it and he loved it. It was his passion. And whether if he saw you without, he wanted to give you something.
Yeah.
And I get choked up just talking about it because I never would have thought in a million years, if you would have told me a couple of months ago that I wasn't going to have my friend here, that it would be Rick.
I'm the same way, man. I'm the same way. He called in and did our WrestleMania review show. Now that review show there, or the post show, we went till 5 a.m. Rick, of course, didn't go to 5 a.m. because he had to work the next day. But he had stopped doing radio pretty much because he went and got what he called a real job, and
He hated it, by the way.
He did.
I'll tell you, he hated it. He loved radio.
He didn't seem like he hated working from home, though. When he got that job at support.com, he actually liked it. And he was moving up in that company. And they got fired over something stupid that I'm not going to mention here on the air. But
yeah, I know exactly the story you're talking about. You definitely don't want to mention that on the air. That's one of those things that's a private function.
Yeah, but I mean,
I remember the day he came out, told me about it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. But
but he was, like you said, he didn't want people to go without. But he wanted. I don't know if I don't know if you want to talk about it. But you said you were there at the end with him. I'll be honest. I logged on yesterday evening and saw the posts from Evan and his sister and Sheldon, and I was like, "This is crazy, man." I was just talking to him a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah.
I'll leave it up to you. But can you shed a little bit of light as to what actually happened?
So in the respect of his family and his mom and his sister, I won't go into too much detail on it, just because I want to give them the understanding that, I respect them and I love them. But, I had heard this, he was going to the hospital, and we always had this thing. Me and all my friends, I only have like 4 solid friends, and Rick was one of those friends. And we said, if we ever got the call from a relative that we were headed to the hospital or we were hurt in any case, we just drop everything. And I mean, drop everything and go.
Right.
And I got that. I was on break at work, and, I'm finding out all the information, and then I find out it's really serious, and I'm taking it in, and it's really hard for me. It's really, really hard. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound good. So I go down there, and I got to talk to him. It was the last time I actually talked to him, and I won't speak after this. I brought my dad with me. We talked to him, and he was still joking at the end.
Yeah.
At the end, he was still joking, still cracking jokes, still lively as ever. He knew exactly who we were, which is crazy. And I told him I loved him. He had mentioned my wedding that's coming up soon, and basically said I'm going to be there. No questions asked. Asked how my family was doing. Said to my dad that he loved them. They talked for a few minutes, and we stayed for, I'd probably say, an hour or so. And we went home, and we didn't think anything of it. Right. I mean, we were like, he's going to bounce back. Because with Rick, everything was next. What's next? What's next? I'm going to do my best. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
And
He
he
always
progressively, unfortunately,
he always tried to stay one step ahead of everybody. He was very much a
yeah,
plan ahead kind of guy. The Rick I knew anyway.
yeah, and it was like, no big deal. My dad talked to him the whole ride home. We're like, no big. He's going to come back. He's going to come out of this. It's no big deal. And days went on. It got harder, and then it was time. So and I just want to do that as more of a respect thing for his
Yeah,
family.
yeah,
I don't
I
want to go into
understand.
super details because that's just a respect thing.
Yeah.
But he loved people. He loved radio. He loved professional wrestling, and people can mock that, but he knew the business, and he
Yeah,
knew
he did.
people in the business, and he knew the pulse of the business. And people are going to do their podcasts, it's SummerSlam and all that stuff, and he would say sometimes the product was shit.
Yeah,
He'd be like, the product's
absolutely.
crap right now,
Absolutely.
and or he'd say the product is hot, and he knew it, and he had the pulse to know if it was going to go one way or if it was going to go another way. And I've heard his radio podcast, his radio. I won't even say podcast. That's disrespect to him, but his radio broadcast, and he would change the direction of the show midway through if he needed to, and I'd be in the room with him. That's how close we were. I'd be in the room with him, with you on the other side, and you'd be like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like, are we what, like, you didn't say it, but like you could feel it. You could feel the pendulum shift.
Yep.
And he'd get it to be great. And with you, and he always used to say, he said, White sounds like a young Jim Cornette. And you do. On the radio, you sound like Jim Cornette. And hopefully it's not an insult.
No, it's
but,
not. I love Jim Cornette.
And you sound like a young Jim Cornette. And he'd say, I like this kid. Like, I don't know, but I like this kid. And I said, Rick, if you like somebody, man, you're going to just do it because you like them. I don't know why the hell you hang out with me, but you like me, and, here we are, and so just, it's an honor that you guys are doing this for him, and he would love it. And he would definitely call in, and or he'd be producing it, one of the two, or running it or something like that. And he just loved his family. He loved his friends, and radio too. And it's not going to be the same without him. It's just not going to be the same. I mean,
this whole podcasting game, there's podcasts out the wazoo out there now, and there's people making money off of it, and they do it for a living, but they don't know. To me, they don't know what the true art of scraping together stuff like Rick did. They'll never know, like what Evan said tonight. They'll never know the true art of it like Rick did. Matthew, I want to thank you so much for coming on. We're going to go ahead and let somebody else hop on, sir, but thank you so much for tuning in tonight and contributing.
Thank you, guys, and God bless. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Area code 913, you're on the line. What's your name? Where are you from?
Dallas from Kansas.
How you doing, dear? Can you give us a... Thank you for tuning in and calling in. How did you know Rick, and what impact did he have on you?
Actually, I'm Noreen's daughter.
Okay.
So she was a part of the Carnage crew. She knew Alex. She knew Rick. She did the weekly podcast thing with them and Casey. So I got to listen to them once a week, and I got to listen to my mom laugh every week with Rick on the radio, just absolutely busting a gut, doing their thing in the other room for... I don't remember how long they did that. It was months and months and months of them talking to wrestlers, doing their thing for just months, and making my mom's life just an absolute dream come true for her. And then, unfortunately, my mom passed away very suddenly, and Rick was one of the first people to reach out after that happened. And I stayed very good friends with him, obviously, until this happened. He helped me out with college. He was one of those people that kind of stuck with me. I'd put something on Facebook like, hey, does somebody want to proofread a paper? And he was one of the first ones to send me a message and go, hey, yeah, I'll check it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
How's everything going? How's everything doing? You doing okay? How are the animals? Because I kept a lot of my mom's animals, constantly checking in, making sure I was doing okay. And so he was a great guy, and I'm really just in shock that he's gone. It's just unbelievable to me that he's gone this soon.
Well, any other stories that you'd like to share? We're going to have his sister on here in about 10 minutes, but is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we let you go? Well, thank you for calling in, and thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
No problem. No, he actually, I think the best one I had was he hit me up. He was a huge hockey fan, and so am I. Mm-hmm. And we were just exchanging messages back and forth. I want to say a couple years ago when Boston was in the run for the Stanley Cup, and it was just an absolute message period between him back and forth and me, because we were watching Boston. I want to say it was like Game 5 or 6, and Boston had to win. And I was actually just going back through my messenger trying to see if I could find it, and it was just a fury of messages back and forth between us of who was going to win the game and if Boston was going to get through. And I remember how much he loves sports, and I am going to miss having those conversations with him about hockey, because he was one of the few people that I know that absolutely loves hockey as much as I do. So I wish his family the best. He was a great guy. He was a great friend of my mom and a great friend to me. I wish his family I just have the most condolences and sympathy for them, and I wish the rest of his friends the best of luck. I know how much he meant to a lot of people. He meant a lot to me the last 6 years. So best of luck to you guys.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing this. It's been nice to hear a lot of people say a lot of great things about him tonight.
Really can't think of a bad
thank
thing
you
to
for
say
doing
about
this.
him. That's just it. You really can't. He had his moments where he would be he would be crude, but you'd laugh at him for it. He was the only guy, I think, in 2017 that could probably get away with some of the stuff that he said, because he's Rick, and that's just who he is. But I want to thank you so much for the call.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for doing this. You guys have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
One more quick story here before we get Rebecca, his sister, on. It shows you how funny he was. He never called me Joe. Very rarely did he call me Joe. I was White. White, how you doing? To the point where people now in the podcasting world call me that. White, how you doing? White, what's up? Whitey, how are you? And he called me that on the air. You know, like I said, don't be funny, White. Whitey, let me push the buttons. And one week, again, this just shows you how good he was. One week, he gets an email, and he showed me the email. He forwarded me the email. Somebody happened to be stumbling onto our show, and they heard him call me Whitey. Now, keep in mind, the world isn't what it is today. This was probably, this was not too long ago. I want to say we were starting to do radio. This was like 2012, 2013. We were starting to do the podcast here and there a little bit. It wasn't a full-time thing, but somebody tuned in and heard him call me Whitey. It's my last name. I've been called that ever since I was a kid. You know, in high school, kids used to pick on me. Hey, Whitey, you know. It stuck. I was used to it. This listener wrote in and talked about how terribly racist we were because I was being called Whitey. And we turned it into a bit. We turned it into an absolute bit. Like, how much can we milk the last name of White for? To the point where I was like, what's next? Are people going to start calling me? And don't get offended here, please, because this is great radio. It's all about great radio with Rick. I was like, is next, and this is another time, I think this is probably the only other time I think I made him laugh, genuinely. I was like, what's next, Rick? Are people, are they, I might as well just call myself Saltine McCracker. And Rick just started busting up laughing. And from that day on, he would try to sneak that name in to every conversation we had, whether it be on or off the air. And we turned it into this fabulous bit of just white boy joke after white boy joke after white boy joke, and just hammer it in, and we can get away with it. We're a couple of white guys doing a podcast. We can get away with it. He was crude, but it was always for good radio. As that one guy in that video said, I just can't get over this here. I going back to Wade Needham, it just shows you how childish we were. We were sitting around talking. I believe we had just recorded an interview with Lanny Poffo. Rick and Lanny were always tight. We just recorded a podcast with Lanny. It was a good interview. Rick's like, let's have some fun, White. Oh, Lord, Rick, what do you want to do now? And again, this is so juvenile. Here it is, two men. We're in our late 20s, early 30s. And we decide we're going to pick on Wade Needham again. Rick finds this guy's address online. Again, I don't want people to think that this is horrible, because it's not. I cracked up. This may be one of those you had to be there stories, but this guy deserved it because he was a bit of a you-know-what. But Rick find the guy's address. He fired up the Skype. He goes, watch this way. It's such a juvenile thing to do. He calls this guy, and this guy lives out in California on the West Coast. He calls a Domino's pizza store. He goes on Domino's website, finds the closest Domino's pizza to this guy's house. Calls him up. The lady at Domino's barely spoke English. So Rick, of course, had fun with that. If you know Rick, he had fun with it. And he goes, yes, I need 5 pepperoni pizzas delivered to this address. And he gives him Wade's address. And these people are sitting there thinking, I don't know if they thought it was a joke at the time, but Rick was dead serious. Rick taught me how to do prank calls. Because that was a bit on our show sometimes. We do crank calls. I need 5 pepperoni pizzas, large size, delivered to this address. Done. He goes, I'm a man in a wheelchair. I'll have the money for you, cash. I'll even include a big tip. Hangs up. We're giggling like little schoolgirls. We got pizzas for Wade. Typical teenager stuff. Somebody said Rick was a big kid. 30 minutes later. Uh-oh, White. Uh-oh. Talk to them. Well, who am I talking to? Hello? And he puts me on a 3-way Skype call. Hello? Yes, sir. Did you order 5 pepperoni pizzas for da-da-da-da-da-da? Yes. He's saying he didn't order them. Are you sure? Did you get the right guy? I'm in a wheelchair. I'm pretending to be Wade now. I'm in a wheelchair. Just knock again. Go around back. Okay. Hang up the phone. 10 minutes later. He said he no order them. Just knock again. You probably got the wrong house. Try the next door. We never pick up the phone again. We don't know what happened to the pizzas, who paid for the pizzas, who didn't do anything for the pizzas. But it was between me and him, that was the funniest bit ever. One more before I call his sister. We prank called Ronco. Ron Popeil. Back when he was selling his knives. And Rick was so on. Again, nobody could do a prank call like Rick. Yes, I bought your set of Ginsu knives, the Forever Sharps. Yeah, these things have a lifetime warranty, right? Yeah. Well, I have a dog, a woofer, little chihuahua. This dog just bit the handle off one of your knives. I need to know where I can get it send this thing to get it replaced. What, sir? Are you for real? Yes. And a car bumper. I tried to cut my car bumper with the other one like you show in the commercial. It's dinged up too. So that's another one I'm going to need to replace. And we stayed on these people for a good 20 minutes. With just far-fetched thing after far-fetched thing that we did with these knives. That's how funny he could be. If Rick was bored, he would find something and just make it funny. Let's see if we could call his sister now. Give me 1 second here. Rick would normally throw it to break, and I swear to God, I was gonna ask him how to wire this soundboard up to where I could do that. I'll find a way. For Rick, I'll find a way.
Hello?
Hi, is this Rebecca?
Yes.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Joe. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to talk to you. I wish it was under better circumstances. You have my deepest condolences, dear.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your brother? We've shared countless stories about his radio career and his endeavors into pro wrestling and stuff, but you were his sister. Is there anything that you could share with us that maybe hasn't been said tonight?
Well, it's actually funny because we didn't really know too much about his radio stuff. Like, we knew he did it and, you know, he loved it. And so it's kind of nice to hear you guys, you know, tell that side of it, because I don't think we knew, like, how big he was into that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, as far as, like, all the people that he talked to and all the different things that he did. I mean, we knew he made a living off of it. And, I mean, he did very well off of it. But it's really cool to hear, you know, everything that you guys are saying, because we didn't know about that really. He's always been big into wrestling. I mean, even when we were little kids, I mean, I'd be getting body slammed in the backyard.
Oh, wow.
You know, he just, I was his, you know, little rag doll when it came to wrestling. We watched the shows together every Sunday, every Monday. I mean, it was his passion, and he found something that worked for him with the radio, and, you know, he made it very successful for him.
I got a question. I got a question for you. And you can tell me yes, no, kiss my you know what, whatever you want to tell me. It's rather personal. Could he be as crude in real life? I mean, we heard his friend call up and say, yes, he could be, but you were a sister. You grew up with the guy. His crudeness is what made him great. His crudeness is what made him great. Was he like what we heard on the radio? Is that Rick in real life, pretty much? I mean,
yeah, he didn't really have much of a filter, and you know, the stuff that he would do. You know, we would go to sports games. He always brought me to the Bruins or the Red Sox or whatever, and you know, there was this one time we're at the Red Sox game, and he cheaped it up, which is not usually like him, and we were sitting in the bleacher section, and he had an empty cup, and he's sitting there as people walk by and is asking them for spare change as they're walking by. You know, and he did stuff like that. And, you know, sometimes it's embarrassing when you're with him and he does stuff like that. But, you know, he didn't have a filter, and he was like that all the time. And, I mean, that's what made him, obviously. He was definitely quite the character.
He always used to brag about you and his niece. I got to go to the hockey game with my niece. I'm taking my niece to the hockey game. He was a huge hockey fan. In fact, he came on here on this channel back during the playoffs. And I'm a Capitals fan. And I was like, this is the year. He goes, I was like, this is the year that me and another host on here, Jeff Edwards, we want to have faith in the Capitals, but they're not going to beat the Penguins. And Rick was like, just because he was Rick, he goes, I'm going to take the other side of it, White. They're going to make the finals this year, and of course they did it. But it was just Rick being Rick. Rick always had to go against the grain and against the norm to me, and be like, I'm taking the Capitals. I think they're going to beat them. This is their year. He loved the Bruins. He loved the Patriots. I'm not a football fan, but I always used to like to hear him talk about football and everything because he was really passionate about it. And you have my deepest condolences, dear. You put out on Facebook today where people could donate money. I've said too that they're below on here on this channel. There's a donation link. If you want to go ahead and donate through the channel, I will find a way to get all the proceeds that we make from this month and next month to you, if we make anything at all. But if they want to donate directly to the family, how can they do that?
They can. I did put the PayPal link, which I heard you mention earlier. I mean, they can send us a message if they want to send something in the mail instead, either to me or my mom, because anything that comes to me, I'm just giving it to her to take care of with, the expenses and stuff like that. So, I mean, I know some people aren't too comfortable with PayPal or whatever, all the digital stuff. So, I mean, even just sending a check's fine too. I don't want to give out our address, obviously,
Right.
Publicly, but if somebody wants to, they can reach out and to either of us, and we can give them our address.
I think you mentioned the funeral home. If people want to send flowers, which funeral home can they send stuff to?
It's Lavery, Chartrand, and Ilario. It's in Fitchburg, Mass. I can post like the actual name of it and address and stuff too. But that's in Fitchburg.
Casey just posted the PayPal link here in our chat room. Thank you so much for doing that, Casey. Rebecca, I'll be honest with you. Your brother taught me so much, and I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't have. To me, it was a hobby. I never got to be as lucky as him and make a living off of this. But doing podcasts and everything keeps me sane. Whenever I have a bad day, I do a podcast. And I wouldn't be as good at it. Well, I'm still not as good as he was, but nobody will ever be as good as he was at this. But I will never be at the level that I am in with this if it wasn't for your brother. You guys have my deepest condolences. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I just, thank you for doing the show. I know he would love it, obviously.
Yeah.
And the video that you had was great too. I'm not sure who that was, but obviously he knew my brother very well. And I actually had asked for the link because I don't know if my daughter will listen to this whole, show, but I want to at least show her that video because I think she would really like that. Just to kind of hear all the nice things that people are saying and stuff too.
I just sent it to you on Facebook, dear.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, this was his passion, and he was great at it, as I'm hearing.
He was so good at it. It's kind of hard for me to believe that he never let you guys on the other side of the curtain and let you know what he did, because he's so damn good at it.
We knew he was, doing it. We just didn't. I mean, at least I can't speak for my mother, but I'm pretty sure, she's the same. Like, we didn't know the volume of what he was actually doing and like all the different things that he was involved in, and we knew it was like wrestling shows and stuff like that because he's always been into that. But just kind of hearing all the different things that he's done is it's crazy.
I mean, he did everything. I'll open up the curtain a little bit here. He did everything from wrestling to towards the end of it. He was helping out a guy who wanted to do like Christian-based podcasts. He would do that for him, and he was getting paid to do it. There was a guy who was a UFO conspiracist. He didn't care what type of radio it was. If he was collected a paycheck for it, he was going to produce you, and he was going to do he was going to do his best at it. He didn't care. He was going to make sure you sounded as if you were on a real AM/FM satellite radio station. He made everybody. The stuff that I'm going to post later on in the week is nowhere near PG. I'll say that for you. It's very, very, very much rated R. Some of it's rated X. And it sounds back, if you're listening to it, you're going to think the audio quality sucks. But for 2004, 2005, that, talking 12 years ago, the technology was still,
Yeah.
It was still weak. It was still not developed yet, but he made the most out of what we had. I mean, I'll be honest with you, he sent me equipment out of his own pocket. I got a spare soundboard, White. What's your address? I'll send it to you. I got a microphone, White. I'll send this to you. He bought me a brand new headset once because mine broke and we needed to do a show. He overnighted me a headset once. Out of the goodness of his own heart. I didn't ask him. He's like, here, it'll be in. He goes, what's your address? It'll be there tomorrow morning. That's the guy.
He used to do that with us all the time, too. Anything I needed. Or, his niece, which, he adored her. And she would be like, well, I'm going to ask Uncle Rick because I know he'll get it for me. And sure enough, the next day, she has what she asked Uncle Rick for.
That's what's up. Tugging at those heartstrings because he had a big heart. Rebecca,
Yep.
I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know that hasn't been the easiest 24, 48 hours for you guys. And just know that your brother touched so many lives. And my life, like I said, he got me my first work-at-home job. I didn't have to work in a brick-and-mortar gas station anymore because of your brother. And my quality of life has changed for the better because of your brother. And I think it will continue to change because of him. And I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight and just chatting with us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for doing the show. My mom's listening. We've got some family members listening as well, so, and they definitely really appreciate it as well.
Thank you so much, and try to have a good night, okay?
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm going to give it the last 5 minutes here for anybody who wants to call in. 434-710-4900, 434-710-4900. And I may have asked some questions here tonight that are a little bit personal, but if I died, Rick would do it. If Rick was doing a tribute show for me, he'd go more personal. And if there is an afterlife, I'd be looking down upon him, laughing at him for it too. And I just hope he's doing the same thing here tonight. But it's just a testament to what a great man he was. He would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it, you know. And then he'd be there, like his sister said, in the stands at a ball game or a hockey game, asking for spare change. Oh man, she mentioned her niece there, and she calls him Uncle Rick. Funny story about Uncle Rick. We were looking for somebody to prank call. We did a lot of prank calls back in the day. Oh, they were so good. Because me and him could keep a straight face for the most part. There'd be sometimes on prank calls where I'd say something and I could hear him in the background, Jesus, White, and then he'd forget that his mic was turned on and he'd have to mute it, and the caller would be like, what? And I'm like, nothing. We found a place in Virginia Beach. I don't even know if it's there anymore. Called Uncle Rick's Frozen Custard. Custard shop. Ice cream shop. So whenever I'd hear about his niece, he'd talk about his niece, I'd be like, oh, Uncle Rick, you going to get her some custard? He's like, we got to get them to sponsor us. And I'm like, yeah, why don't you make the call on that? So that was a running joke we had, Uncle Rick's Frozen Custard. Some jokes are not going to make air because they're just far too crude. I think one of the best interviews me and him ever did was we got to interview Eric Young, who is now in WWE. At the time, he was in TNA doing Team Canada, and this is the bit where he was very early doing the falling down with the promo and being the jokester character. He brought a ton of life to those interviews, and I wish I had them all. I really do. I would love to get my hands brass eye. If you're listening to this, I would love those archives, man. It makes me sad that I don't have them anymore. Just because the fact of the production value for 2004 was top notch. You're going to listen to it today and think these two guys are underwater. They're broadcasting from a fish tank. Sounded crisp though when we were doing it on Shoutcast. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I just want to say that I miss my friend. It sounds like he was more of a friend to, I feel like a bit of a speck on the radar compared to some, which I don't mind that in the slightest. Well, tonight, folks, I would introduce the station, but you're listening to us here live. Hopefully you are, so you already know that we are 1650 PWAM. And this is a very, very special tribute to our friend. He was a brother. He was a uncle. He was a son. And to me, I will always consider him my mentor when it comes to podcasting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we're here to talk about the late, great Rick Hendrickson. Joining me live right now is our first guest to talk about a little bit about Rick, and that is, I don't know if you want your last name being said, so I'll just call you Casey Carnage.
I don't care.
Casey Osborne, Casey Carnage. Casey, how are you holding up, man, since you've found this out? You've been, by the way, folks, Casey has been very instrumental in helping me put this together. He's been kind of my liaison between Rick's family and this, so I want to thank him for that. But how you holding up, Casey?
Okay, there were a few tears on the first night, obviously, when I first heard about it. But, it's one of the things you just got to come to terms with.
Yeah, it still hasn't hit me yet, to be honest with you. I'm still in a state of shock. But well, tonight, folks, I would introduce the station, but you're listening to us here live. Hopefully you are, so you already know that we are 1650 PWAM. And this is a very, very special tribute to our friend. He was a brother. He was a uncle. He was a son. And to me, I will always consider him my mentor when it comes to podcasting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we're here to talk about the late, great Rick Hendrickson. Joining me live right now is our first guest to talk about a little bit about Rick, and that is, I don't know if you want your last name being said, so I'll just call you Casey Carnage.
I don't care.
Casey Osborne, Casey Carnage. Casey, how are you holding up, man, since you've found this out? You've been, by the way, folks, Casey has been very instrumental in helping me put this together. He's been kind of my liaison between Rick's family and this, so I want to thank him for that. But how you holding up, Casey?
Okay, there were a few tears on the first night, obviously, when I first heard about it. But, it's one of the things you just got to come to terms with.
Yeah, it still hasn't hit me yet, to be honest with you. I'm still in a state of shock. But why don't we do this? Why don't we share about how we first met Rick Hendrickson, and we can go from there about how big of an influence he has been to us. So I'll let you start first. How did you meet this wonderful man?
He was producing Monday Night Mayhem. I can't remember who all was hosting.
Oh God,
but he was producing it, and they asked me. I was in there, and they wanted to do a year-end Christmas thing where they had little bits and pieces, but they wanted this thing to be long. They wanted me to do all these pieces and condense it to like 10 minutes. But the pieces they wanted, it was going to be like 50. It was like, okay. So I went in and I started editing everything, and I was listening to all this stuff and getting all these pieces together that I wanted to get.